I don't even know what time it is.
It drops put in my eyes this morning. We're good. We're good. Yep. Right. Good evening, members of council and staff and members of the public who have joined us. Council is here, including Councillor McKay, who is in PEI. Thank you for joining us, Councillor McKay, in the virtual world. Welcome to the Town Council meeting of July 18th, 2023. This is our last scheduled council meeting in July. That's not to say it will be our last meeting in July, but council doesn't meet in August. So stay tuned. There could be another special one before this month is over. But as far as we know at this moment, it is the last scheduled one. I would like to call this meeting to order and pass it over to the Deputy Mayor to read the land acknowledgement.
Thank you, Mayor Donovan. We would like to acknowledge that we are meeting today here in Kispootwick, one of the 7 districts of Mi'kma'ki homeland of the Mi'kmaq people. We acknowledge the treaties of peace and friendship, and we thank the Mi'kmaq people for their generosity in sharing their homeland with us. We are all treaty people.
Thank you. And I will ask for in a moment a motion to approve the agenda. I will note that there will be no motion coming out of in camera. Does the agenda, public agenda does say there will be, but there will be no motion coming out of in camera. Would that change? Deputy Mayor, if you could move that motion.
I would move that the agenda be approved as circulated and or amended.
Seconder, please. Okay, Councillor Butler, Councillor Elliott, I'll get you on the next one. Are there any other additions or changes? All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, that's passed.
Okay.
And let me scroll down. Again, we have a number of minutes. Public hearing meeting of July 12th, 2023.
I would move that the minutes of the public hearing meeting of June 12th, 2023 be approved as circulated and or amended.
Councillor Elliott will second it. Are there any additions, errors, omissions? Hearing none. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Those are passed. And the public hearing meeting of June 20th, 2023.
I would move that the minutes of the public hearing meeting in June 20th, 2023 be approved as circulated and or amended.
The seconder, Councillor Palmater, any errors, omissions, additions? Seeing none, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
I'm going to ask, I have forgotten to turn my head to the left to watch Councillor McKay, so if her hand is up, if I could ask the side of the room to, I guess actually both sides of the room can see her. Could look both ways. That is passed. And finally, the special town council meeting of July.
Town council meeting. We're still here.
Oh, we're still on the town.
We're on C.
The town council meeting. I had you read it?
I read the June public
Oh, I
hearing.
thought we did that one. Okay. Could I if you would give us a motion for the town council meeting of June 20th, 2023.
Yep. I would move that the minutes of the town council meeting of June 20th, 2023 be approved as circulated and or amended.
And seconder, please, Councillor Elliott. Are there any errors, omissions, or additions? Seeing none, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? That's passed. And now the special town council meeting of July 4th, 2023.
I would move that the minutes of the special town council meeting of July 4th, 2023 be approved as circulated and or amended.
Seconder, please. Councillor Palmater, are there any errors, omissions, additions? Seeing none, all those in favor of approval of those minutes, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Those are passed. Now, change glasses to see this part. Comments from the mayor. Wow, that just keeps getting busier and busier and hotter. And in spite of the heat, a very successful Canada Day. Thank you to staff for all the work you did. It was a fun day. The rain held off, I think, till 3 o'clock when the festivities started to wind down. So that was great. this Sunday in Wolfville, although I understand it was also on Saturday in Kentville, there was a really lovely Pride celebration in Waterfront Park. I have asked for trees in the park. It was very hot for all those performers and people who were there for 3 or 4 hours or more. Kudos to you, but it was really successful. It was fun. It was celebratory. It was colorful. It was just great. So thank you to all the organizers, any that are here. I'm sure our staff were involved in some of that, and many community volunteers in the community. So it was a great event. And I had the pleasure and the honor of being at the opening ceremonies of the Special Olympics that was held a little earlier this month. Again, it was a lovely opening ceremonies, lots of celebratory feeling. It was a great day. It was nice to see some of the pics of the winners and the participants. So that was lovely to have. And by all accounts, it was also very successful. And of course, we're all looking forward to Mud Creek Days at the end of the month in just a few weeks. I was excited, and I have shared this with council today, to receive the email from Acadia welcoming Dr. Jeff Hennessy as the new president beginning September 1st. So I know I speak for all of us when I say we wish Dr. Hennessy the very best. I'm really looking forward to working with him. I think he is going to be playing at Mud Creek Days with the Sundries. So that's got to be a first for Acadia and Wolfville, I am sure, but that's going to be fun. And the only other thing, and we're going to talk about it a little bit later in the agenda item when we talk about the Accelerator Fund, but I have started some informal meetings with community organizations and individuals who are interested in some process to develop, I'm going to call it maybe non-market housing. So this is not we need all kinds of housing. This is not the housing necessarily that we have just approved to be built in the East End, but there are very many people in our town and in our immediate region who really struggle to find housing, and we are blessed, I believe, to have a number of organizations who have come forward. They either have land or they have an idea or they want to be part of that. How that happens is not clear at this stage, but the fact is that there is, I feel, a groundswell of interest in the community. And as I have seen so often in Wolfville, when there's a need like that, people in Wolfville seem to come together and we develop something that is uniquely Wolfville. So I'm excited about that. I know Director Lake will talk a bit more about that later in the evening. Does anybody else wish to bring anything in this session of things you've done, things you'd like to recognize, people you'd like to recognize, events?
No,
If you're
you've
like-
mentioned, oh, I'm sorry, you've mentioned special Olympics.
Okay. Yes. All right. Public input. Do we have, first of all, is there anyone in the gallery who wishes to come to the mic for public input? No. Carolyn, you know the drill. So for public input, please state your name and where you live, and you have 4 minutes, since I think you are maybe the only one today. So.
My name's Caroline Whitby, and I live on Maple Avenue in Wolfville. As I've got a little more time, 2 things. One, I don't know whether they're comments, suggestions, or an observation around the compost change that has happened. One, I lived in the county for 30 some years, and we never had a compost site. We always used our green bins, and we could always bundle 4-foot lengths of brush and put them out every week. So I'm wondering if we could provide a reminder of that to people here in Wolfville, that that is always available to them. And maybe as you think about next year, maybe we don't need anything more than that. However, while we have a facility that's now operating out of the building downtown, it happens during 12 to 4 on a Saturday afternoon, probably the busiest time in town. You're bringing additional traffic downtown. Two ways possibly to suggestions to consider. One, maybe change the time. I don't know what would be another good time, maybe Monday evening 4 to 8 or something, but again, looking at traffic issues. The other thing would be maybe you can, the actual gateway to the compost site, still there. They're not working through that bit. That's not where the road goes through. Maybe the bins could be up there, and people east end of town don't go through town. A lot of people, when they're coming from the other end of town, go up and around Ridge Road anyway. So that's comments, thoughts on that. My other, and I think they're questions, is so back in March, there was a joint meeting to receive the report of the recreational facility. And we're, as I understand it, in 1.5. And it talked in the meeting about people probably anxious to have input. I'm not aware, maybe I've missed it, that anything has been put on the floor or discussions with the community. I'm not sure that most of the community are aware here in Wolfville that there is a possibility that we may not have a pool in town. So I think that should be raised. And when it talked about Wolfville Blooms being the place for input, I went there and all I see is the report and something saying email or speak to your councillor. So maybe my first question, and then I'll say something else, is has it been on the agenda? Did I miss it? What's the process for public input, recognizing we're in 1.5 and something should be happening?
Are you finished your presentation? I will give you a quick answer, but I didn't want to cut
Oh,
into your
well, okay, if you want to hold that, I'll, okay. So then my next question, or my next comment is one of the recommended steps was undertake in the report that was presented, undertake direct and immediate discussion with Acadia in respect to the findings now that it's out. Include consideration of the partnership potential for meeting both community, recreational and university needs to for access to aquatics, sport hosting opportunity and renovation potential of the existing athletic pool complex. So I happened to be at the facility and I was speaking to Brian Finnis about something else, and I just asked him, you know, where the discussions were. He said there had been one meeting. So I'm just looking for an update on that. And my final question is, I'm just interested in knowing how many councillors have actually been at Acadia on one of the 4 days a week during the term year when Smile are using the facilities at Acadia, because I think if you haven't had the opportunity, it's one you should not miss and take advantage of.
Thank you, Caroline. It's used. I will take the leeway and answer some of your questions just because it's the last council meeting before we break. Your first one, staff, certainly staff have heard your comment about the compost site. I'm sure they can take it under advisement. With respect to the rec center, I chair that committee. We are waiting for the results of 1.5 and then we can share more information. Unfortunately, we cannot at this stage because I don't have anything beyond what's on the website. We don't have anything more that we can share. Obviously, we're talking about land, and that's until we have a site, the sites that we're looking at are still confidential. The CAO and I did meet with Brian Finnis and Chris Colbeck. Chris is no longer at Acadia, but the discussion there was that until such time as there was a regional facility, it was their sense at that time that the pool would stay open. So I'm hoping, and I'm as eager as you, maybe more eager to hear what's happening with 1.5. I'm hoping sometime in the fall, we will be able to share an update with the community.
Can I ask a question based on that? or
You could
not?
give me a call in the
Okay.
office, okay?
Okay,
Okay.
all right, because that's not my interpretation of the recommended steps and what I understood 1.5 was.
Yeah,
Anyway.
1.5 is basically looking at land, updating some operating figures. We did get some from the consultants. We didn't feel that they were robust enough. We are also, I think those were the two, site and I have, and Mayor Matart have also made very early overtures to the MLAs and the MPs to say we are planning to build this. It's in our budget, it's an 8-year out timeframe. And we just wanted to let them know that we would be coming forward with a grant request at some time in the future. So that's what 1.5 is doing.
So this recommendation for the one statement that I read, has that happened or is that after 1.5?
Which is what was,
So it's page 105 in the feasibility study.
I don't know what it says.
It's the one I read, undertake direct and immediate discussions with Acadia.
That has happened. Aaron,
That has happened.
yes, and
So
the
you
answer,
cannot share that.
I just did.
Okay,
I just did that until such time as there is a regional pool. It was the comment of the two people that we spoke to that the Acadia pool would stay open. Until we have a new facility, Acadia would stay open, was what we were told. Yes, and as councils mentioned, this municipality contributes money each year to keep the Acadia pool open. So, okay. Thank you. I know I digressed a little bit from our usual, but I thought that would be okay. I did it. All right, that brings us to motions from the committee of the whole. And the first item is the nuisance party bylaw. Would, well, you've had a few. Would any council, you have to give everybody a little chance. Anybody like to put that motion? If not, the deputy mayor is keen to step up.
I can read it if you want.
Okay.
Yep. I move that council give first reading to the amended bylaw, chapter 97 nuisance party bylaw as attached to RFD 034-2023.
And a seconder, please, Councillor Ingham. First, before I ask if there are any council comments or questions, I think I know the answer, but does staff want to say anything more about this?
Not on this unless
No.
there's any questions.
Questions from, not the question, but are there any questions of council? From council about this item? Councilor Case, thank you. That is your job to keep an eye on Jody. All right, hearing none? No, you're not. You are allowed to make comments at public input. There will be, that was public input. What we just had, when Carolyn Whitby stood up and asked a question, that was public input. Yeah, what we do, so items come first to committee of the whole, which we did a couple of weeks ago. There is a fulsome discussion of council, not of the public. Public may watch. And then so you will not see a lot of discussion because that happened at committee of the whole. When it comes to council, council can again ask questions of staff or they can make comments about it, but the public is an observer in this case. If you would like to make, I will again. If we want to go back to public input and you would like to make a comment about this item, you may. Okay. But that will be part of public input. So we will.
I can clarify too. So just, so this is first reading as well. So once if this is passed, second reading won't happen until September. So we're going to do engagement throughout August and September with the newly formed landlord group, with citizens, and get feedback. So that will inform council before they make the final decision. This is just the vote to say, okay, we like it enough. Let's go out. Let's do that consultation and it'll come back in September.
I believe that consultation has happened. Am I correct?
So this is an existing bylaw, so it's already in place. So there was some consultation that was done initially. We have started to reach out to do some consultation on this. There's some proposed changes, and you can read in the report kind of why this is coming forward. But the landlord group, for example, that's newly formed, will definitely be one of those targeted stakeholder groups, as well as residents that are interested in coming forward. So you'll have an opportunity.
I'm going to direct you to the YouTube of Committee of the Whole for that information, or I'm very happy, or I'm sure the CAO or staff responsible for this would be happy. If you want to leave us your name at the end, can give you, but this is a council meeting, and really other than public input, the only discussion is around this table. Okay, thank you. But please talk to me afterwards and we'll get your questions answered and we'll get you in the right direction. Okay. Where are we? We have yes, I know that we have a mover and a seconder, and we have no questions.
I guess I have a
Okay,
statement. I have a statement
Yes,
as
go
opposed to
ahead,
a
Ian.
question. I still don't like the way that we're dealing with the noise side of this, so I will vote against this at this stage as opposed to moving forward with this. I think we need to take it back and redraft it totally myself. I don't like it at all.
Did you want to explain why? What part?
Well, we have specifically with the landlords, we have the Tenancy Act. The Tenancy Act makes the landlords, it's almost impossible for a landlord to get rid of a tenant if they're paying the rent. If they're not paying rent, it takes 6 months to get rid of a tenant. If they're paying rent, it's impossible to get, I shouldn't say impossible, almost impossible to evict them. So now you're making the landlord ultimately responsible for a tenant that they can't get rid of. And I just don't think that, just to me sounds wrong.
Deputy Mayor?
Can I respond?
Absolutely.
So, what I see in the changes that we're making is that we are providing greater leniency, if you like, or support to the landlords than the way the bylaw exists now. I think that the changes that we're introducing recognize the efforts that landlords make and give them credit for those efforts, so that if they advise their tenant that they can't do it. I mean, what we're looking for is a demonstration of goodwill. And I think that that's what this covers, is that we are including the various ways in which we recognize the fact that the landlord is concerned about this issue and has made efforts. Right now, as the bylaw stands, that isn't there, that doesn't happen. So I think that I really don't understand why what we're proposing hurts the landlords, because the situation right now is the same in terms of eviction. Nothing changes that. That's a provincial thing. That's nothing to do with us. What we want to do is engage landlords, and we know some of them are very much engaged and try very hard, and others don't. And so we would like those who don't to sort of learn from those who do.
But all we're doing is giving a checklist to the ones who don't. That's the way I perceive it. We're going to give a checklist of things that the landlord's going to say, well, I did this, I did this, I did this. It doesn't matter how good or how bad they are as landlords, we're just giving them an out. they were like, they had this tenant sign a no party bylaw. They had them sign what's that? Who wouldn't, the landlord wouldn't get a ticket. So that's what we've done.
Whoa,
Okay,
yeah,
So
Councillor Palmer
that's
starts
what we've
the clock.
done. So any landlord, every landlord will have that list checked off. That's all. I mean, it's very simple. Check that off and there will be no, and so why do we have it at all? If we've given them a way to get out of it by, making sure they have all of this checklist done, then every landlord that's worth anything will have that checklist done to save them the $500 or the whatever the fine would be. So it's just a checklist.
I'm going to ask the CAO to weigh in, please.
So the way it's written now, the checklist is just examples of what the landlords could do to help show that they can be not guilty of an offense because they've taken reasonable steps. Our compliance team would still have to look at the situation and look at what steps the landlord did or didn't do to make that decision. So just because boxes are ticked doesn't necessarily mean it's a free pass. So each circumstance will be dealt with on its own merits and the circumstances at the time. It's not just you have to tick all these boxes and you're good. It's here's a situation, here's the steps you took. Was it reasonable? And that's a list. It gives landlords some ideas of some steps that can be taken, that could be taken into consideration by compliance.
So maybe that's even worse than, so now it's going to be somebody's opinion on whether or not they did a good job or not. Right.
It will come down to the compliance team does have that ability in their jobs to weigh the facts in each case and make that determination. Yes.
I don't think it's I don't like it at all, personally.
Okay, Councillor Ingham, good. Okay, so this is first reading, as I understand. Depending what happens here tonight, if it passes first reading, then staff will be back out. They have done a fair bit of consultation with landlords now. They will be back out speaking to landlords. I'm looking again to you, Aaron.
Yes, I've asked Kaden to actually set up a specific discussion with that informal landlord group. And if we don't get a great turnout, then we'll look at other ways to do some outreach to make sure we're engaging landlords as one of the key stakeholders as part of these changes.
And I don't know who this gentleman is, if he's not a landlord, but he wants to be engaged. How would that happen?
So Barb and I still have to sit down to come up with the plan on exactly how we're going to go out with broader community consultation engagement on this issue. But if you want to leave your name, we can definitely have a conversation with you, but there will be different avenues where folks will be able to give feedback.
Okay, are there any other questions or comments from council? You ready for the question? Although, oh, she has her hand up. Councillor, the one time your job. She did. Councillor McKay.
Thank you. Yeah, I understand both points from Councillor Palmer and Deputy Mayor. But we did discuss this at length and we had legal look at it. But I'm really interested more in the conversations that are going to be had. This is first reading. The next part of engagement will be crucial. And whether this passes a second reading or not, I think the next series of conversations with the landlords will be pertinent to making this a really good bylaw. And so I'll vote in favor of it. For those reasons, I really am interested in the next conversations.
Question. All those in favor of the motion as read, please indicate by saying aye. 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 Opposed? Okay, that's passed. Committees of council policy. Just looking at my. Could I have a motion, someone to put the motion on the floor? And Laura, you're going to do a presentation, are you, or going to speak to this?
Sure.
Sure. Oh,
Just before Laura gets started, I just want to clarify one thing because I think the wording in the RFD is a little bit confusing. If you look at the wording in the bylaw. So section 5.2.4, the way it's worded in the RFD, it kind of makes it look like if allowed by council, the deputy mayor automatically becomes ex officio on all committees, when you actually look at the wording in the bylaw, the intention based on the last discussion was that as the committee appointments happen annually, if the deputy mayor is to step in the place of the mayor as the ex officio on any committee, that would be determined by council at that time. So it's written correctly in the proposed policy. It's just not written as clearly in the RFD. I just wanted to clarify that because I know there was a bit of confusion.
Yes, so the deputy mayor is not ex officio, she. It covers for the mayor who is ex officio on all committees, should the mayor not be able to be there. That's what the intent is.
Yep, exactly.
Or if the mayor wanted to say during the committees of, when council entertains the appointments, if the mayor was to say, okay, I think this is too much, I want to pass this committee on to the deputy, that could be decided by council at that time as well, but it'd be a council decision.
Can I ask, and just for clarity, what about external committees? I know we don't have control about that, but what is the policy on if the mayor is not there, if the deputy mayor? If, you know, what is that? Do you know what I mean? Like for voting, like if the mayor doesn't show up for IMSA or rec study or anything like that, do we
Well,
send,
IMSA, we have an alternate.
but not on the rec
Councillor
center though, you know,
McKay.
just as we're talking about it, like what would we do on that? You're the chair of that.
Right.
So you're,
I'm
just asking as
Yes.
I'm just
I assume
asking,
that-
I'm
my
asking the
unders-
question, so I'm clear. That's
My
all.
understanding is that the deputy mayor would fill in the mayor's absence.
Okay,
and-
I just wanted to be clear. Like, would there be
Yeah.
another counselor that maybe has more information on something that you would choose rather than the deputy mayor? That's just my question.
We might.
Okay.
Good. And presumably a one-off committee like that, which wasn't, it's not it's a task force, it's not a committee. When we set that up, we would probably have that discussion. I'm assuming. Yeah. Laura.
I actually don't have much to share other than you had the report, the changes are there. Erin already mentioned about the deputy mayor part. So is there any questions other than that one? Oh, we can't see Jody, you're right. Okay, I'm gonna,
I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Mike's doing his job.
thanks, Mike. Councillor Butler.
Okay, let's put the motion on the floor and then maybe that will spark questions or maybe
Or
not.
hopefully not, yeah.
I can move. Roger. I would move that council approve the revised committees of council policy 110-001 as attached to RFD 010-2023.
And a seconder, please. Councillor Butler. Any questions or comments from council? Seeing none. And no questions of staff from council. Seeing none, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, that's passed. And the council policy review task force, maybe the CEO would like to speak to that first.
Sure. So we had the discussion at committee of the whole, and there was a few takeaways after that. One, folks were asked to express interest if they would like to serve on the task force. And we actually had 4 members of council come forward. And so there's a change from what you would have seen back in committee of the whole, where we recommended a committee of 3. We're actually suggesting that all 4 that showed interest actually serve. I think it will be a really good mix and good discussion. So those 4 names are there. And also we were going to come back with the terms of reference for the task force, and that's been attached. So if you have any questions, I can speak to that, but hopefully it's fairly clear.
Motion on the floor. Councillor Ingham.
What? I would move that council appoint the following councillors to the council policy review task force. Councillor Jennifer Ingham, Deputy Mayor Isabel Madeira Voss, Councillor Jody McKay, and Councillor Butler. And the council approve the attached terms of reference for the council policy review task force.
Seconder, please. Councillor Elliott, are there any questions of the CAO or any comments of council? All right, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? That's passed. Community video camera pilot extension.
And nothing specific to add to this unless there's any questions.
Motion on the floor. Councillor Elliott, could you read that into the minutes, please?
Yes, I would move that council approve the community video camera pilot extension that will run until October 31st, 2023.
Seconder, please.
I'll second that.
Counselor Butler, any questions, comments? Counselor Elliott, do you have a comment or question? No? Anybody? All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? That's passed. We have a number of items of new business. The first one, and I'm assuming it's new business that staff will come up and speak to each of these. We have an amendment to the PID 55274591, comma 2215 to 223 Gasbro Avenue. Director Lake.
I really don't have a whole lot to add to this file. It's been, I've presented it, I think at this point, I think I've presented this 6 times. So
I just want to hear you talk about it again.
Yeah. So just reminder, it's just an additional 10 units on that site. We had a recent public hearing. We've had a discussion at committee of the whole. It's gone through planning committee. So it's here for your consideration tonight.
Thank you, Director Lake. Deputy Mayor.
Okay. I would move the council approve the development agreement amendment on PID 552744591 Gasbro Avenue as outlined in RFD 025-2023.
And seconder, please. Councillor Palmer. Any questions, comments? All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Did you have a question?
I just wanted to check that this was Travis's.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So that was passed. Financial statements. Director McLean.
I appreciate everybody yielding their time to me. I think that's what they do in the States. So I'm going to take extra time to read page by page. First off, I'd like to acknowledge that the partner in charge of the audit, Jessica Clahane, is here. She was unable to make our audit meeting, so good to see her here to see the statements through to council. And just an appreciation for the work that their audit team did, and things went smoothly this year, so that's always a good thing. Hopefully everybody's taken the time to read through both the RFD, which is got a little bit of detail in it, as well as the statements themselves. And I'm not going to go through them in as much detail as we did at audit. I think we had a very fulsome discussion, probably a couple of hours by the time we were done, cover both the statements and the notes in some detail. So I would like to, where this is council's annual financial report, just highlight a couple of key elements that aren't necessarily drawn directly from the consolidated statements themselves. And then if there's questions, obviously, we can try to answer them. First thing we highlight every year, just so it's clear, and it's part of our accountability, is the statements are the responsibility of management, not the auditors themselves. They come in to ensure that we've maintained the records properly, prepared the statements in accordance with standards, and that's their role. But the responsibility lies with staff, with management, and through the audit committee, we kind of vet those statements in some detail. So that's important to note every year, because I think that can be a misconception kind of out on the street, so to speak. They think the auditors come in and prepare the statements, but they check our work and they make sure that we're living within the bounds of what we're supposed to. So one of the items that's in the RFD document itself is references to the financial condition indicators that the province issues. So I've done a summary of where we sit in terms of those indicators. They give a kind of a high level outlook, and if you're to take the consolidated statements as well as the non-consolidated, because all that data feeds into those reports. you'll see that the town fares well in comparison to other towns and against the benchmarks. Technically, there's only one benchmark that we're not rated as low risk financially, and that's the residential tax effort. And we keep dancing near the low risk, so we're relatively close. The other yellow indicator that you'll see on that page is one that the province has actually dropped as an indicator, at least temporarily, and that's budget accuracy. We've included in our report because we actually think it's important. So although the province won't report on it when they issue the next set of indicators, we've included it just to continue that data input to council. And then if there's questions as to why we may not be meeting the threshold, we can answer those. But so when you look at that, we rank overall as low risk for any financial instability as the province sees it through their indicators. So I think that's a good thing to draw from the year-end statements themselves. And then I've highlighted a couple of the key indicators. Uncollected taxes is one, and we talked about this at audit. I think we need to pay attention to that as we move forward. We're not in a high risk situation at all, but the trend has been larger dollars in arrears at the end of the year. And as we've discussed through last year, much of that relates to one business that has multiple properties. So we continue to pursue that particular issue, and we'll be bringing back policy amendments to the tax sale policy later this year to deal with not with that particular property owner, but that type of property and whether there's a difference in risk as compared to a single family dwelling. So we'll bring some information back in the fall that we think will address that situation going forward, whether it's this particular property owner or other property owners. I think I've highlighted one here on my page of this is the first year you'll see operating debt. And if people ask you, that has to do with the PACE program. And we've talked about that in the past. We have long-term loans out to residents, and we have a long-term loan with the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, interest-free, good terms, 20 years. So there's information in the notes to the financials on that. So if anybody wanted to read up on that, dive into the statements themselves. I guess one of the highlights or biggest changes in this year's consolidated statements, and the auditors are probably tired of hearing the phrase, and I think we said the phrase, I don't know how many times during our committee review, was asset retirement obligation is a big change in the standards. It's an important change. It has to do with recognizing the likelihood of a potential future liability as it relates to disposal of assets. And it's not, you're selling a truck at the end of the day, that sort of item. It's things of a more material nature. So for the town, it was a possible asbestos removal in buildings, and for the water utility, properly capping wells at the end of their useful life. So there's several note disclosures in the statements around that. The calculations have gone in. The auditors have spent a fair bit of time looking at that because it is a new standard, and we'll have to revisit that every year. And there's estimates involved, and that speaks to management's role in trying to come up with reasonable estimates. So if there's any questions on the details of that, feel free to ask tonight. I can try to answer them, or I'm always sitting in my office, and it's a rather, there's a lot of detail in that to go over if somebody was really interested. So I would just highlight that. Inventory, if anybody picked up on it, would be one of those items on the statement of financial position, increased fairly substantially relative to the dollars we used to have. We used to carry around $30,000 a year. It relates to the water utility. This year, you'll see the increases up into the 6 digits, into the hundreds of thousand. Part of that is we now have a complete setup for the wells, replacement pumps to manage situations we've had in the last year. We didn't have that on hand in the past year. That comes with some dollars. We have hydrant material basically to mitigate supply chain issues. We can't wait in the water utility for a year to get replacement parts. So we have a little bit more replacement part dollars there, not material from an audit perspective necessarily, but it highlights the steps that staff have been taking to mitigate some of the outcomes of the COVID situation a couple of years ago and how that's continuing to impact supply chains. So I mentioned that one is just a change from past years. Beyond that, I wanted to highlight that non-consolidated, which is outside the audit realm, in reference to how we budget and where we ended the year. The town ended the year with in the town operating a very small surplus of some $25,000, essentially break even when you're looking at $11-12 million of operation. And the water utility ended the year with approximately, I think it's $3,600 of a surplus. Again, basically break even. Both speak to fairly tight to the budget line. For the town, there were some items that allowed us to reach that, but I think we have to be a little bit more diligent moving forward in terms of staying within budget framework. There's a lot of things people want and a lot of things that we'd all like to see, but we can't always simply spend the money. So we have to make sure that we stay within the budget framework approved by council. And when changes are made, we have to bring those forward to council in a timely manner. And I think we actually have a item later in this agenda dealing with fire truck that typifies that sort of thinking. Other than that, I'll open it for questions. I didn't intend to go through the statements in detail because the audit committee got that pleasure a couple Fridays ago.
Thank you, Director McLean. Are there any questions of the director, Councillor Ingham?
Just like as you're talking, I'm just reading through this. There was a lot to digest, but I'm always interested in the deed transfer tax. So basically the actual was down 145,000 and so you know that's a lot of money. So we'll have to sort of see how the trends go in the years. What was the deed transfer tax amount? Do you have that? So my own
The actual
knowledge.
deed transfer tax now,
Yeah,
I may have, if you saw me carry a bunch of
yeah,
stuff
yeah, I
out,
know.
that's just in case. I
I'm
get it.
always interested in that, just because it comes up and if it's unbudgeted, something's unbudgeted, we're like, where's the deed transfer tax and all this?
So deed transfer tax, we have talked about that at budget time. We try to keep it relatively conservative and it had been set at $400,000 for a number of years
Okay,
up until our year that we're currently in. The actual for the year that was just ended was $543,000, so more than budget, but a fairly big drop from the previous year. And that's when we revisit every year just to make sure we don't get too optimistic in the
Okay.
budget setup.
so you're still not being optimistic in the budget, in the forecast.
I will
basically.
purposely not be
Yeah.
optimistic, and the reason for that is if you go too optimistic and we don't hit those targets, the town has limited ability within a fiscal year to offset that revenue loss.
Okay.
And then you're more likely to have a deficit than less
Mhm.
likely. So that there's a reason to be conservative in that number.
Yeah, thank you.
Other questions, comments? Councillor Butler?
I move that council approve the 2022-23 consolidated and non-consolidated financial statements for the year ended March 31st, 2023 as amended.
Thank you. Seconder, please. Councillor Palmer. If there are no other questions, all those in favor, please indicate by.
Well, I just,
You got to be faster.
I know I do. I just wanted to say I was on the audit committee and the auditors have made such a gushing comment about how much they'd like to work with Mike and his team. I think we should be read into the records that I think they did an excellent job, and thanks, Mike and your team.
Anything else? All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? That's passed. RFD 027-2023 salary review. CEO?
Yeah, I'll just hit a couple things. Council has received this and has reviewed it quite thoroughly. So the last time we did a formal review was in 2015. We are recommending that we do an external review every 4 years to line up with collective bargaining so that every council can kind of touch that and know where their wage grids are and how they're competitive in the market. So we partnered with the town of Berwick and the district of Lunenburg to go out and find a consultant to work with us. Knightsbridge Robinson Surratt was a successful proponent, and each one of our municipalities received a customized report based on comparators that made sense for them. So the recommendations are there for your review. There's a new band that's being proposed, and that's one of the motions is actually to adopt the new salary grid and then to give direction to implement the changes. In the financial section, you can see, just going to flip to that, what that is. So what we're recommending for this year, if this moves forward, is not to retroactively go back for this, but for a couple positions that were contractually bound to do so based on qualifications being received. So overall, the net impact of all of the increases between actual salaries currently being paid in the fiscal year 23-24 and the recommendations is just shy of $100,000. The difference when you prorate it to start August 6th, which is the recommendation, is $60,000 prorated. And you can see of the 25 permanent salary staff positions covered by the review, 17 positions would see an upward adjustment in pay, while 8 would see no change in their current pay. There were quite a few of our positions that were very close. Some of the senior staff positions, administrative staff positions, and one other position were quite off the mark, and that's where a lot of the changes are. Other than that, as I said, we've reviewed it. So if there's any particular questions, happy to entertain them, but the motion's there for your consideration.
Councillor Butler, would you get the motion on the floor,
Certainly.
please?
One at a time or both together?
I guess we should, there are two, why don't we do them
Do
separately?
them as two? Okay. I move that council adopt the new salary grid for non-unionized staff as presented in RFD 027-2023.
Seconder, please. Deputy Mayor Madeira Voss. Are there any questions of staff or any comments that council wants to make? Okay. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, that passes. Councillor Butler.
I move that council give direction for the CAO to implement the proposed salary adjustments effective August 6, 2023, as presented in RFD 027-2023.
Thank you. A seconder, please. Deputy Mayor, thank you. Are there any questions of staff on that one? All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That one is also passed. That brings us to the fire truck pumper tanker purchase. We did receive a report today. I think maybe Chad is going to come up. And
Mike.
Mike.
That's right. Thanks for hearing from us tonight. Some people may feel that this is deja vu because we've already had to come back to council for this particular piece of apparatus. So our 1998 pumper 11, as it's called, is scheduled for replacement in the 24-25 fiscal year. Unfortunately, that truck takes about 600 days to construct. So we came earlier. Two things. First, it was over budget because of COVID, the cost drove up. So we came back seeking additional funding. And then we had to come back seeking an early to apply for that truck early so that we could get a letter of intent to the supplier so that we could lock in the funding because it goes up every quarter. So we did all of that. And then the Greenwich merger conversation started happening and things started changing in the background. So the Coles Notes version is the leadership of the department believes that this truck, as opposed to replacing it with a pumper, would replace it with a pumper tanker. So a few of the key differences of a pumper tanker is the major one is it hauls more water. So instead of about 500 to 600 gallons of water, we can haul 2,200 to 2,500 gallons of water, depending on how we construct some of the compartments in the truck. So that's the real big difference. So what that means is when our current tanker 21 is scheduled for replacement in 31, 32, I believe it is, at a projected cost currently of $1 million, we wouldn't replace that apparatus. So we'd replace, basically consolidate two trucks right now. Some of the reasons is one of the major reasons is you have to have a qualified driver for these apparatus. They have to be able to operate. They have to have confidence on the roadway. Right now, we have to have 2 qualified drivers, one to get a pumper there with some crew, and then the second driver, usually it's just a driver. Sometimes another person will go with that truck, but to have the water come support the initiative, especially if there's no hydrants or if you're in a non-sprinkler building, things like that. So it would eliminate the need to have 2 qualified drivers. We could reduce it to 1. Wear and tear on an apparatus, you're running 1 truck down the road instead of 2. We can get more water on site sooner. So all of our crew and apparatus water, everything will get on the road. We can get all of it that we need there in 7 minutes to 14 minutes under these standard. And so as opposed to waiting for that tanker truck that could be waiting for a driver, things like that. So what it means to the budget is an additional $300,000. So the budget is $1.7 million for this pumper tanker. We would need to put a letter of intent in ASAP because the price is expected to go up again in September with the quarter. So that's why we're here tonight seeking that, and I can answer any questions. I think we detailed a lot in the RFD, but if you have any questions, I'm certainly willing to try my best.
Before we go into questions, I'm wondering, Director McLean, if you want to talk about anything, but how it's financed. I wonder if you want to do that. Oh, thank you. But you heard me, right? I wonder if you wanted to talk about the process of financing. I'll give you that opportunity.
Okay, and there's a little bit of information in the RFD itself around that, but important to note. So the apparatus for the fire department, we have traditionally tried to build the capital reserves, and there is a separate reserve for fire apparatus and equipment to the extent that we can replace them with cash on hand at the time of purchase or delivery, as it were. The last time we borrowed money towards a truck would have been over a decade ago. So there's no debt right now related to the fire department. Over the last number of years, and more drastically since COVID, the price of the apparatus have been increasing. So I made a note in the RFD itself that the $1.4 million as originally in the budget, or 1.7 now, can be covered by those reserves. It'll be close, but I think we're pretty much on target to have enough reserves on hand when it arrives. Part of that is currently it's intended to be acquired or delivered in fiscal 24-25. I suspect with the 600-day build, there's a chance that that will fall into the following fiscal year, which is another year of building up reserves. And we had already recognized that the ladder truck, which is to come right after this, we would not have enough reserves, and it would be too difficult to build the reserves in the time frame. That aerial truck has gone from a proposed used truck, pending a new fire hall. It'd be very difficult to find another used aerial ladder that fits in the existing hall. We've talked about that. To a new truck, which we had in the current budget at $2 million. We already know that that's probably now outdated a year later. So though that one will be borrowings. And then we should have close to enough reserves to start building up for future replacements, especially where we'll knock off the one tanker out in year 8 or 9. But the goal is reserves. We cost share that with the county. So that's more or less 50 cent dollars from the town, 50 cent dollars from the county.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Butler. It's a money motion.
I thought I turned my mic off. Okay, yes, there's no other, don't mind doing this at all. I move that council approve an additional $300,000 towards the purchase of a pumper tanker.
Councillor Elliott, seconded. Are there any questions of staff? Councillor Elliott.
This is just my lack of knowledge probably, but I saw some drone pictures of the barn fire over in Lower Canard. Right, it's a whole series of barns and it's the one in the middle. And I'm thinking, does this particular pumper and tanker together better fight a fire like that, which took everybody's reserves, like of all the departments? It was amazing.
Yeah, that particular fire was, yeah, it was intense for sure. What it would allow us to do is get more water on scene quicker. Because if you're going to a barn fire, that would be the first truck out the door, regardless if there's hydrants or whatever have you. There's a process that happens to secure your hydrant, so to speak. So you have to have crew to run the line off the truck, get it into the hydrant, flush the hydrant, get the truck hooked up. So that takes time. Sometimes you can do it in 1 minute and 30 seconds, sometimes 4 minutes, depending on what you have for a crew on your apparatus. So by having that 2,200 gallons of water quickly, you could potentially stop the fire in its track, and then you have additional resources coming, whether it's mutual aid or you have a hydrant. For example, the Korean restaurant fire, I think we were right around the 2,200, 2,500 gallons of water, and that put that fire pretty much out. Naked Crepe was another example of that. So these high-rise, high-risk areas that are non-sprinkler buildings in particular, that truck you would see go out the door first because of that reserve of water. It just gives you those extra couple of minutes to get your water supply established, whether it's from a mutual aid source or hydrants. So to answer your question, it would have helped. Now that had a lot of fire load, so it probably wouldn't put much of a dent into it. But your situations like your Naked Crepes, your Victoria Historic Inn, your Korean restaurant fires, those are those high impacts. You can get there really quick. You get the resources on it fast. It could have a huge impact for sure. It's a lot of the departments in the area are going in that trend. So Kenfill's new pumper tanker that they're following that trend. They replaced 2 trucks with 1. Canning is just awarded a tender to have a pumper tanker built. Kingston is doing the same thing, and there's many that's already in service. New Minas have 1, Brooklyn Fire and West Hants have 1. So it's starting to become more of a frequent thing because of your volunteer retention, your qualified drivers, and just getting that asset on the ground really quick.
Thank you. Councillor Palmer.
In the regards to the trucks, so not that we don't want you to see you come back again, but are we gonna be able to get it for that amount of money?
Yeah, we're pretty confident. If we get the letter of intent written, I think our plans are about 3 to 4 weeks out. So as soon as we have the plans, we can tweak the finer details later. But once we have the structure of the truck, that locks in the price. And then we can get the letter of intent to the awarding vendor. And then it'll lock the price in to protect us from those future increases that's coming.
Would this truck be built by the same people who are building, if you say Kenfill's getting 1 now?
Correct. It would be very similar to their spec.
Good, yeah, good.
Councillor Ingham.
Thank you. I was just going to ask the same question that you were, just to make sure. But you did a really good presentation, and I understand how you're consolidating the 2 trucks and you're going to have more water capacity, which does make sense. Can you tell me, when did you think the next replacement was going to be? Was that 2031? Would we be looking at it? Because 1.7 is a large amount. So I'm just wondering, when would the next large amount would you anticipate with the trucks revolving? Like
it is. So the next large amount would be our aerial truck, and that's in.
Yeah, we've, in the 10-year CIP that we prepare, they're all in there. So the aerial truck follows the year after this one. Then we have another pumper rescue out in year 6. And we're dropping, in theory, the one out in year 9.
So there's 2 other trucks that'll be replaced before the $1 million savings. We'll use that term loosely.
Yeah.
That we'll see.
I mean, it's almost impossible to say what they're going to be for price coming forward, really.
It is.
Yeah.
Now that aerial truck will be right around, hopefully the same time when the Greenwich Fire Wolfville merger takes place. So the transition coordinator may see something different through that whole process. We don't really know what that looks like. So these needs may change as those assets are acquired and liquidated and things like that.
If I could add, in terms of the costs, each year that we do this budget iteration, those numbers have changed. And for the 2 trucks, we're actually talking about the aerial and this combined pumper tanker. If you went back to the 2021 budget, there were in total, I think it's $1 million higher than it was back then. So that's part of the budget process every year, is bringing updated values. And we'll check with these guys as we move into next year's.
And the thing we have to remember, the trucks that we're replacing still have value to other departments. So there'll be a cost that will recoup from the sale of those apparatus. And we had a conversation, those used apparatus are going for more money now because of these highly inflated costs for a new. Some smaller departments just can't swing that. So we'll be able to sell these current usable apparatus for a higher premium than we could before COVID.
Okay. It seems to be the case. That discussion came up at in discussion of Valley Waste, that that they were getting much more money than they anticipated for their used equipment, vehicles, cars. Yes. Other questions, comments? Councillor McKay, you're good? All right, all in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? That one's passed. Housing Accelerator Fund application. I believe Director Lake is going to come up and present. Your agenda says report to follow. There was and will be no report. This is the report. I think council already knows that. I say that for the watching public.
I'll just be brief here. I just wanted to have some continuity coming out of Planning Advisory Committee. I did present this somewhat at length and did present a bit of a framework on a potential application if we were to pursue something. So just for those that weren't there, the Housing Accelerator Fund is a federal government grant opportunity that we have been exploring. Essentially what it does is it provides you with a certain amount per unit that you can essentially promise beyond what your average sort of number of building permits that you would issue per year is. And so on average, just for people's information, historically, we would issue or create about 25 dwelling units per year. When one of Peter Pauly's buildings come on, for instance, we've had 100, but those are sort of spikes. I know 2010 was certainly a year that some buildings came on. We've had others since. So some of those amounts were fairly substantial. They're up to $40,000 in some circumstances, and even more for particular types of housing units. Along with that, there was an embargoed housing needs assessment that we had shared confidentially with our committee, and they're still not out publicly, the needs assessments. But it certainly does, just broad strokes, it does paint a picture of needing a lot more supply. And I'm sure every community is going to have a similar picture painted. So we'll be bringing that when it is released to council and talking about that at planning committee as well, so that there'll be more opportunity to unpack that. But just with what is a very short time frame at a time of year when it is difficult to move the needle on projects, and with the level of uncertainty where we are creating 25, we've counted what we think maybe for sure will happen. We're still not certain those will happen. And with the recent interest rate spikes, the labor shortages we have, I think there's a lot of units in the pipeline if we were to look out to say 2035. But when you're just looking at from today until 2026, making promises and accepting substantial amounts of money with strings attached to it, we as a staff have looked at it, and I think Planning Advisory Committee agreed that it's just a really big lift with a lot of uncertainty right now. So yeah, we've the mayor and I have had a few discussions with different potential projects more on the non-market side of the housing spectrum in the town, and hope to bring more of that forward to council, have more public discussion, look at sort of accelerating some of these projects, so to speak. And just to be honest, from my seat, a lot of our potential partners really aren't even close to investment ready. So some of them have no capacity to take on a project through the planning stage. And the planning stage could involve coming to council and asking for a rezoning to make a project viable, just as an example. And so once you get a project through the planning, you then have to finance your project, and you need to find labor to build your project. So these are like broadly different phases of the building cycle, and a lot of people that are potentially providing non-market housing or even almost any types of housing are really up against it right now to pull all of these pieces together. So there's more to come. We are actively doing a housing policy review at the Planning Advisory Committee. We did have a representative from the Nova Scotia government talking about small option homes, and we still do want to bring a non-market I guess, a housing strategy, so to speak, forward. And we're looking at other changes to bring more supply into the market. So I just wanted to come up and give a bit of an overview. I know that there is some talk about the opportunity, but I think the decision at this point is to pass on it. And I'm sure there will be other opportunities, particularly when you look at the staggering numbers that people will review in this needs assessment. Thank you.
Any questions for staff? Comments? If I may, I would just like to build on Bevan and I did meet with have a Teams meeting with a group in the community that might be one of the ones that's a little bit farther along. And after that meeting, it's as Director Lake said, it's clear that there are maybe 4 or 5 groups that we could identify that have a concept, but the concept could be as this one, which was the Wolfville Baptist Church. And I can say that publicly because it did come to PAC a year ago or some time ago, and it has been talked about within the membership of the Wolfville Baptist Church. They're probably the farthest along in their thinking in terms of having a concept. There are other groups who have come to me who have land that they'd like to do something, but that's as far as their thinking goes. I know there are a lot of people in the community. I know some have talked to Councillor Elliott. Certainly people have spoken to me. I've spoken to people like, we've had Russ Sanchez in to speak to us. He's a fellow Rotarian. So I hear often about how desperate the need is for young people who are couch surfing and without homes. We certainly heard from Acadia when the board of directors was speaking to us, but we certainly know that there are particularly international students who arrive in Nova Scotia and have nowhere to live and did not realize that they would have to search out the market themselves. Many discussions, and I think those will continue with Acadia in terms of what they might do, and they have hired a company now to take a look at that. I think there is a range of people with maybe with land, but certainly with goodwill and well-intentioned to groups who have land and maybe have a bit of a concept. I think there are 2 needs. One, I believe we could assist with, and that's just bringing the stories together of the people who need housing and people who are interested in building housing. What I sense we don't have, because housing is not beyond the zoning that we've all been through in terms of the East End. Beyond that, municipalities in Nova Scotia, I can't speak for Halifax. Halifax may have a little bit of a different system. It's a provincial mandated service, but neither the provincial nor the municipality who gets the comments that are really filled with angst. People who tell me, I have a mother with children who is trying to move out of Chrysalis House. There is no place for this person to go until we get people through Chrysalis House. There's a whole backlog of women with children who need a safe space to be, who would like to be in Chrysalis House. We have very serious situations like that. And we don't have at this time any capacity to say, let's roll up our sleeves and see what we can do to help you. I have been speaking to Director Lake. I would like to bring some, in the fall, some people together, particularly those people who may have land and may be saying we want to do something. I did a presentation to Wake in February or March. Wake is Wolfville Area Interchurch Council. Again, very passionate, eager to do something, don't know how to get it off the ground. Councillor Elliott probably knows better than any of us, because I think she was around when some of these things were happening, like the co-op, and that's just because she lived here. It has nothing to do with age, Wendy. Evangeline Court, we know we know people in the community who I understand literally had nail and hammer and were building some of these buildings. That's a different time, but I think we need something for our time. And I am committed to working to getting something in this community together to help address this really serious issue. And I think that we will start that in September. And I have seen, whether we talk about the bringing of what must be now in this town, 6 or 7 Syrian families. And I do remember a meeting in the Anglican church where it was overflowing. It literally could not all be in the church, and people were signing up, and people stuck with that for 5 years to bring families and pay for families and help with the healthcare of families and provide English lessons and all those wonderful things. This is a community that will do those things. And I think this is an issue that certainly anyone in this room, anyone on council who would like to be part of that, I think this is an issue that we need to figure out how to manage in our town, because I'm not seeing a whole lot coming from outside of our town at other levels of government. I'm frustrated that we have a really good financial program that came out and is due on the 18th of August and expects us to pull something together during the summer months. So I think we have to do it, and I am committed to finding a way, and I'm sure there are many around this table who want to roll up their sleeves too. And of course, with Director Lake's help. So that's my speech, but I passionately feel this is an issue and a worry, and I believe there's a solution. I just believe there is. We just have to find it. Thanks, Dan. Any other comments or questions? Okay, that moves us to the info quarterly report, attendance report of council. I think that's a for information item. I don't know if there are any comments. There's no motion. I will okay. I think I've got it right. Are we ready to move to in camera? There's nothing that I have missed. Could I have a motion to go in camera, please, Deputy Mayor?
I would move the council. Oh, wait, that's the wrong one. I would move that the regular meeting adjourned to in camera.
Seconder, please.